Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views from the Nefarium on Thursday, March 19th, 2015. And I got to tell you, what a week. I have to talk about this one, and I'm going to forego my normal routine of reviewing or talking about articles in particular because the story the last couple of weeks, as most of you know, was the very strange disappearance of Russian President Vladimir Putin. He went missing and stopped all public appearances on March 5th. That was the last time that he was seen publicly talking to the Italian Prime Minister Renzi. And then once it became clear that he had gone missing, he had canceled a number of public meetings, the speculations began. The speculation was that his mistress in Switzerland had given birth to a love child, and the president of Russia had decided to cancel all the business and fly to Switzerland to be with his mistress and new baby. And of course, that's nonsense. The idea of the Russian president doing any such thing, that's not going to play. The other idea was that President Putin had taken ill, that he was suffering the flu, that he had suffered some sort of spinal injury. And again, we're going to find a story today that casts a little doubt that health was the reason. There were even discussions on the internet that because during this time the Kremlin came out and said that there was going to be a big announcement, nobody in the press corps leave Moscow, stay here, big announcement coming up. There was even some talk because of this on the internet that Russia was going to disclose the extraterrestrial presence. I even had a discussion with a friend of mine who was advocating that point of view. And again, folks, while I'm not philosophically opposed to the idea of extraterrestrials, that one just didn't play with me because the geopolitical context right now, with tensions being so high, the last power I think that anybody would look at and say, well, they're going to be the ones to make the announcement about disclosure would be Russia. Because in the political context right now, the geopolitical context, that message would get lost and many people would tend not to believe it. So I discount the disclosure aspect of it. So let's look what we had leading up to President Putin's disappearance and inexplicable disappearance from his public commitments. First, we had the murder of the opposition leader Boris Nemtsov, all right? And then there were allegations that the Kremlin was going to take over direct control of the investigations of the murder. All right, now, there was speculation at the time, you'll recall, that Nemtsov's murder was actually staged by President Putin and his forces in the Kremlin. At the time, I I doubt that, and I still do doubt it. And the reason was that it would not have served President Putin's or Russia's interest to off someone in that manner. He would be the first one that everyone would suspect on the world stage. So then why the disappearance? Well, the Nemtsov murder did indicate that there was some serious, perhaps even deeply serious fissures within the factions inside the Kremlin. So my first suspicion runs to that this may have been some serious factional infighting taking place inside the Kremlin, and that in order to preserve his government, Mr. Putin, and perhaps some mid to upper level echelon ministers went into hiding in order to deal with whatever they were dealing with in terms of a potential coup. I suspect on that basis that we're going to eventually learn why he went missing. But I do also suspect it had something to do with the Nemtsov murder. Now, why am I saying that? That there's factional infighting going on. Well, Nemtsov was one of the people who I believe was connected in some form or fashion to the Russian oligarchs that were in turn connected to the Western financial oligarchy. In other words, this was an event of trying to get some sort of power back on the basis of that group of people. Now, let's go further. During this time that Mr. Putin was absent, the United Kingdom came out with a very significant announcement, and that was that it was going to join China's World Development Bank and be on the board of governors. And a second thing happened, and that was Russia was given a membership seat on the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Transfer in Brussels, Belgium. That's SWIFT, folks. So in other words, Russia is now sitting on the board of governors of the International Financial Clearinghouse, whereas before it wasn't. This is huge, folks, because it means a huge shift in foreign policy on the part of the United Kingdom. Although we haven't seen the ripples come out yet, and the United Kingdom is going to continue to play against Russia in the Ukraine, these are huge long-term shifts, folks. Now, all this is being done while President Putin is in his disappearance mode. Then, just to review, to continue our review of what was going on, then last week, President Putin apparently ordered all of Russia's Arctic-based military forces on alert to stage high military drills and games, war games, in the Arctic Circle. Now, there's some people arguing that this is in response to NATO war games and drills going on in the Baltic states and in the Black Sea. I don't know. But that, I think, is significant. And again, I think it's related to everything else. So now today, before I get on to what I think may have been going on in the last couple of weeks, and as I say, this is high-octane speculation. It could be totally wrong. It could be totally right. I don't know. It's as good as anybody else's high-octane speculation, which is to say it's worth about 2 cents, all right? Now, the BBC just yesterday came out with this article because President Putin was seen yesterday for the first time in a couple of weeks. Russian leader dismisses gossip over absence. And I'm going to read just a very, very few paragraphs from this article. His disappearance from public view had sparked rumors that he might have fallen ill, died, been removed in a coup, or once again become a father. Earlier on Monday, Mr. Putin ordered the Russian Navy's Northern Fleet onto a state of full combat readiness in the Arctic. It is now official, skipping somewhat here in this article. He is neither dead, nor it would seem has he been stricken by some life-threatening illness. In fact, he looked reasonably healthy in the video broadcast of the meeting with his Kyrgyzstan counterpart, Almazbek Atambayev, in St. Petersburg. Now, that's a huge clue, because by looking reasonably healthy, this tells us that Mr. Putin probably didn't cancel all of his meetings because he was in ill health. Something else was going on. Continuing. While the Kremlin press office is having the last laugh about all the wild rumors of the past week, it's still saying nothing about why he canceled meetings and was not seen in public for what was, for him, a long absence. This comes, skipping a couple paragraphs, as the U.S. continues to deliver military equipment to the Baltic states and Poland, and while the NATO Navy exercises continue in the Black Sea. So it's straight back to business as usual. And then one final paragraph. The Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko urged the European Union on Monday to renew its threat of further sanctions against Russia if Moscow does not implement the Minsk agreement. Now, I've already pointed out that Russia just gained a membership on the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Transfer. That was a huge blow to Washington, because Washington and the UK had been pushing for Russia to be removed from access to SWIFT altogether. All right. Now, what then could this possibly mean? Here's my high-octane speculation, folks, and I think it has to do with these drills that Mr. Putin has ordered. I think that we're going to discover eventually, that maybe there was some sort of internal power struggle, and that whoever was launching that power struggle against Mr. Putin was deliberately coming from the West. In other words, this was something the West had launched. This was an attempt to remove Putin by similar means as they did Yatsenyuk in Kiev last year. And Mr. Putin took himself out of the picture, I think, in a very clever way, and probably ensconced himself with not necessarily the high-ranking public figures that you and I see on television all the time, like Sergei Lavrov and Shoigu, the defense minister, and Rogozin, the space guy, or even Prime Minister Medvedev. I think he removed himself from public view in order to deal with what we would call a crisis of continuity in government. I think this was a continuity of government thing that Mr. Putin did. And that means that whatever was going on, whatever pressures Moscow felt that it was under, were very extreme. And the reason that Russia isn't commenting right now is it probably has intelligence on who was behind it. I strongly suspect that that would be the West. And I strongly suspect that the reason Russia isn't going to comment, at least for the moment, is because that would expose how deeply embedded their own intelligence is. So in other words, I think this was continuity of government. It was in a certain sense a kind of a drill, but nonetheless there was a real threat, and putting the Arctic fleet, Russian fleet, on high combat readiness alert is part of all of this. Mr. Putin is back. He's clearly signals he's in control. He's clearly signaled that it was not his health. So there is something going on inside of Russia. I don't suspect we're going to know for a long, long time. I do suspect that the Russians are going to leak out little hints and tidbits as to what went on. I think part of this is related to Russia gaining a seat in SWIFT and the UK deciding it's going to join China's World Bank. So big things are going on. It could be that all of this is related ultimately to the Russian drive to dismantle NATO. We're going to see. It's going to be an interesting year. Anyway, that's it for this week's news and views and really high-octane speculation. Thank you for watching, everybody. God bless, and I'll see you on the flip side. Bye-bye.